by Jessica Bruder. And our student book selection is No Fixed Address by Susin Nielsen, who we are fortunate to have with us here tonight in this online forum. These books both have themes of housing and economic insecurity, which is also currently impacting many Hillsboro families and individuals across ages, cultures, and backgrounds, and why we were happy to center these books for this year's Hillsboro Reads program. Please note that Jessica Bruder will also be joining us this Saturday, March 26th at 7:30 p.m. You can also register online for the Zoom link. So, a little bit about Susin Nielsen, our author guest tonight, who made my week when she retweeted my promotional tweet about the program. She is the award-winning author of many fantastic books with wonderful titles, which I'm proud to say we have available for you through the library, including Word Nerd, Dear George Clooney, Please Marry My Mom, The Reluctant Journal of Henry K. Larson, We Are All Made of Molecules, Optimists Die First, Tremendous Things, and No Fixed Address, our Hillsboro Reads selection. They're just fun titles to say, aren't they? She got her start writing for the original hit TV series, Degrassi Junior High, and has written for over 20 Canadian TV series. Her books have won critical acclaim and multiple awards, both at home and around the world, including the prestigious Governor General's Literary Award from the Canada Council for the Arts, and they've been translated into many languages. She's been described as the John Green of Canada, and had a dream once that John Green, another fantastic author, was described as the Susin Nielsen of the US. She lives in Vancouver, Canada, with her family and 2 naughty cats, and is currently showrunning season 3 of a TV show she created called Family Law. If you haven't had a chance to read No Fixed Address, we have copies available for you at the library. We have books, ebooks, and audio formats. And I'm pleased to share that for the month of March, Powell's Books is offering a 20% discount for our Hillsboro Reads titles. Use the code, all caps and one word, Hillsboro Reads, when you order online or visit the store. And thank you for supporting your local bookstore. Before we get started, and I do hope Susin may share a little bit more about those 2 naughty cats in addition to sharing about her books and writing, I do want to share some thanks and acknowledgements. We owe special thanks to our amazing friends of the Hillsboro Public Library and to our incredible Library Foundation of Hillsboro for making this and all of Hillsboro Reads programs possible. The financial support from our friends allows us to provide giveaway copies of the books, sharing widely within the community. This year, we gave away 700 copies of No Fixed Address, focused on schools and students within the Hillsboro School District. With the Library Foundation's financial support, we are able to bring in great speakers like our author tonight and Jessica Bruder, who's coming on Saturday. I also want to say a big thank you to the Hillsboro Reads committees who make this and all events happen. They ensure all details are covered and take great care in selecting the titles, using community input and feedback along the way. After Susan's talk, we would love for you to stay on for a few additional moments to share your feedback. Your input is important to us as we look to plan the 2023 Hillsboro Reads program. Another big thank you goes to our employees, our volunteers, our community members, and the Youth Advisory Council, who helped contribute 2,000 items for our Dignity Drive, an event inspired by No Fixed Address, where we collected hygiene supplies and will be directly putting these into the hands of students and youth in the Hillsboro School District. Finally, I want to say thank you to Susin, who I promise will be speaking in just a moment. Thank you for indulging my introduction. Susin, thank you for writing this incredible book. This book is very touching and compelling and is a true compassion builder which is a power of fiction. I sobbed after reading it, thinking of youth, including myself, who have experienced housing insecurity, and how the issue is complex, but with more collaboration, commitment, and support, how communities can help lift one another up. Please help me welcome via Zoom, I know you're clapping out there, author Susin Nielsen. Susan?
Hi, Hillary. Thank you so much. I kept wanting to put my video on just so that you could see my expression with your lovely introduction. But yeah, really, thank you very much. And then I was also trying to wrangle one of my cats so that I could show you one of my cats, but they get nervous when they hear voices on Zoom, and they have vanished. So I won't go chasing after them because
that's good. We want you here. So I'm glad,
yes.
glad you're here, and I'll turn it over to you now. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. And I'm really just delighted to be here. And I feel so honored that you chose my book, and I'm deeply impressed with everything that your community has been doing in terms of your drive to get all of the hygiene products, et cetera, getting the book into so many hands. It's really quite remarkable. What I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to share my screen, and I've learned how to do this. It's very exciting. There we go. It worked. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me. And I'm just going to start with, I have always wanted to be a writer. And in case that sounds like something I can say now that I am a writer, I have proof. This photo before you, I literally have that very diary right here, my one-year diary. I was out in our garage after my first book, Word Nerd, was published, and I came across boxes of my old journals. And this was the first one I ever kept. And I was 11 years old. I was in 7th grade. When I was going to school, I don't know if this happened in the States, but when I was growing up, they did something called acceleration, where they would have you do 2 grades in 1 year. They've stopped doing that, which is really good. But I was 11, so I was a year younger than all of my classmates at this point. And I'm just going to read you the opening paragraph from my diary. It says, "This is the first day I've really written in a diary. The reason I am is because I love writing stories. And if I do grow up to be a famous writer and later die, and they want to get a story of my life, I guess I should keep a diary." So I clearly had a strong sense of self. But, aside from being maybe a little bit arrogant, I'm amazed that, I was telling my own future, possibly with the exception of the famous part. And I did. I became a writer. The first part of my career, I was writing for a lot of TV shows. A lot of these are Canadian TV shows. Some of them were in the States. Degrassi Junior High, Ready or Not, Edgemont, Degrassi The Next Generation, Braceface, Franny's Feet, Alice I Think, Robson Arms, Heartland, Cedar Cove, Arctic Air. Those are some of the shows I wrote for. I even did do a little bit of work on one of these franchises, The Real Housewives of Vancouver. The books I've written over the years, as Hillary was kindly saying, Word Nerd, Dear George Clooney, Please Marry My Mom. That was before he went and got married to his wonderful wife. The Reluctant Journal of Henry K. Larson, We Are All Made of Molecules. Optimists Die First. Princess Puffy Bottom. And Daryl, that's my picture book, and you have to say the title like that. No Fixed Address, and Tremendous Things. Those are my books. So what I would like to talk to you about tonight, I thought I would talk a little bit about, I joke that this is my favorite subject, me. I thought I would just tell you a little bit about my background and how I became a writer, And I think you'll also see perhaps how it informs some of what I write about, possibly a little bit as well about no fixed address. This is my mom and I many years ago. I grew up with my single parent mom. She was and is, I should say. My mother is alive and well. Nothing like Astrid. Um, but my dad left before I was born. I didn't meet my father until I was a teenager. So it was really just my mom and I. And, she had to work to support us. She was a nurse. We did not have a lot of money for extras. We certainly, I like to say we were a family that was rich in love. But we did not have a lot of money at all. We always were fortunate enough to have a roof over our heads. I don't ever recall feeling insecure about that. My mother made all of our clothes. She made that beautiful, very wide lapelled blouse she's wearing. She made the blue one-piece zip-up jumpsuit that I am wearing, which I remember was a little small in the crotch and very uncomfortable. We moved around at some very significant points in my life because mom had to go where the jobs took her. And so this is my 7th grade school photo. Normally, if I was doing this in a classroom, I would get the students to guess which one of these charming 7th graders is me, but I'll leave it on the screen for a moment and then I'll let you know which one is me. And one of our significant moves happened at the end of 6th grade, before 7th grade. 6th grade ended. We packed up my mom's Pinto and we moved from Chatham, Ontario to London, Ontario. And my mom, of course, had to go to work every day to support us. So it meant that for that entire summer, and I mean, this was not helicopter parenting days. I was left home alone with my cat, interestingly named Mississippi. We did have a television, but it got like 2 channels. We couldn't afford cable. This is, of course, pre-internet, pre-video games. So I had no friends that whole summer. I was left alone with my library books because we had a little bookmobile that came past my street once a week, and my very active imagination. And I don't really consider this a sad story so much because I also know, I believe it's when I started to form myself as a writer. When I started 7th grade, the other thing that happened in London was that all the kids were so far ahead academically than they were in Chatham, Ontario. So I was failing a lot of courses in grade 7. And I remember one day our teacher, Mr. Brand, gave us an assignment to write a story. And I wrote a comedic murder mystery. And I got a really good grade on that murder mystery. And he said something like it was a superlative story. And I remember being so grateful that I had found something that I was good at. And that was the year, of course, that I also started this diary. So I really got it in my head that I was going to be a writer. I told you my mom made all of my outfits. So I can tell you that she made the outfit I am wearing, and I will show you which one is me. That is me. She made me that beautiful skirt out of different swatches of fabric. And I think I chose that lovely shirt to go with it. So from that point forward, I was writing a lot. I like to call this my first published book, The Smallest Snippet of Snippeton. They put it into our school library, and 4 kids took the book out. So that was my first readership. I had a readership of 4. I still have the one and only copy. You can see I did my own illustrations then, and my artistic abilities have gotten no better since then. These are the boxes that I told you about right at the beginning that I found in my garage. I was truly writing all the time. So I always like to say this too, because I know when I do these talks, I know there are writers, aspiring writers out there listening as well. And, I guess what I would say is if you love to write, just keep writing. Please save copies of things, because nowadays we do everything on computers. Save copies, put it away. You'll be happy for it later. And I can tell you I've written so much garbage. I still write garbage today, right? But the more you write, the more you can at least learn to kind of sniff out the garbage, perhaps. I started writing a lot of poetry in high school, and I would send it off to places like 17 magazine. I don't know if 17 still publishes works from readers, but they certainly used to. And this is what I would get back from 17 magazine. I got a lot of these rejection slips. And I remember I only got rejection slips. They never published anything I wrote or sent them, but I was actually quite happy with this rejection slip because it was the only one that the editor hand wrote a note on the bottom, and it says nicely written, but much too depressing for us. So everything I was writing in those days was very depressing, very maudlin. I remember the name of the poem that I wrote that got this note back, and it was the very subtly entitled Suicide. So when I finished high school, quite honestly, there were so many things that I was not good at. I had closed a lot of doors, but I knew I loved to write, and I knew I loved to watch TV. So I wound up going to school in Toronto, Ontario, at a program called Radio and Television Arts at Ryerson, and it was a great program. But when I graduated a few years later, it was hard to find work. At that point, I was trying to write screenplays, even though I didn't know what I was doing. And I was doing a lot of temporary jobs, working as a secretary in office buildings, just so that I could afford to pay my rent, put food on the table. One day, a friend of mine told me that there was this new show hiring in town called Degrassi Junior High. Degrassi Junior High, as seen on public television, it was on PBS in the States. And they did not hire me to write that first season. They hired me to do craft services. And that meant I had to feed the cast and crew muffins, coffee, sandwiches. At the end of the first season, the kids on the show wrote a poem to me, an ode to Susan, the bran muffin queen. We eat them, we die, then we turn green. So that's what they thought of the work I'd done. And they weren't too far off from the truth. I was young. I was in my early 20s. I didn't know how to cook. I didn't like to cook, but I loved working on the show. I loved being on set. I loved watching them film. And it was a very groundbreaking show for its time. It was the first show that dealt head on with heavy teen issues. Teen pregnancy, alcoholism, drug abuse, all sorts of issues. And adults didn't swoop in to solve the problems. The kids kind of had to figure things out for themselves. And I mention this only because, again, I think it had a profound influence probably on, my own future as a writer as well. Between first and second season, I knew I wanted to be hired back on the show, but I had to find something I was better at than craft services. So I wrote what's called a spec script, a speculative script. I took characters I liked, gave them storylines I thought would work, and I handed it to the head writer. And I said, would you read this and tell me what you think? And he read it and he said, I think it is not very good, but I see a spark in your writing, and I'm going to give you a shot at writing an episode. And that one episode wound up turning into 16 episodes of Degrassi Junior High and Degrassi High over the next about 4 years. And it really launched my TV writing career. And it's also where I got my first chance at writing books, because they started this series of novelizations based on the characters. And forgive me, I'm doing this weird thing on Zoom where I'm getting up and moving away from my screen for just a nanosecond. because I've got a few of these on my shelf. This is one of the 4 Degrassi books that I wound up writing. Melanie. Snake is another one that I wrote. And basically these books were based on things that happened to the characters in the show, but I had to obviously flesh them out and write a lot of new material. And, you know, I was just paid a flat fee for these books. And I loved writing them. And I remember thinking one day I'm going to write an original young adult novel. But honestly, the TV work, I did a lot of TV work. And quite honestly, I think I was really afraid to write an original young adult novel. You know, when you write for TV, you're writing for other people's voices. And I think I was very nervous about writing for my own voice. What was my own voice? There's a little known fact about my time on Degrassi. I also acted in a few episodes. I played the school janitor, Luella Hawkins. And I will only say that I think this is an exceptionally brave move of me, because I'm going to show you. That is me. They put me in that outfit and they put the grease on my face, but that Billy Idol hairdo was all mine. And I still kind of like it. So I am now going to flash forward about, gosh, like decades, to No Fixed Address, because I want to talk to you about, you know, where the idea came from, etc. And, you know, if there's any moral to the first part of the story, I think it's simply that whatever your passion is, and whatever obstacles get thrown in your way, and certainly I had loads of obstacles, and, you know, we all do, and failures and disappointments, etc. But if you stick with something, it's amazing what can result. And when I look back, I'm amazed at my own tenacity, I suppose. But it, you know, I think it was just something I felt I needed to do. I loved writing. No Fixed Address. Why did I write this particular story? It's twofold for me. Probably 10 years ago now, I was talking to a young guy who told me that he and his girlfriend and their 8-year-old daughter had spent a year living in a van when he was doing his final year at the University of British Columbia here in Vancouver. And what an adventure it had been, and how much his daughter had loved it. And I remember having the very judgmental thought, I bet she didn't love it all the time. I bet maybe it was fun in the summer, but I bet she didn't love it when it was November and pouring with rain here, and it gets dark at 4:30 and there's no heat, and you're this close to your parents and there's no toilet. Maybe it wasn't always so much fun for her. Flash forward a number of years, and we started to have serious and growing housing crisis here in Vancouver. What started to happen, and I noticed it a lot in my neighborhood of Kitsilano, is that old homes were being sold, torn down, big new opulent homes were being built, and they were standing empty. Nobody was living in these homes. And what started to become apparent to a lot of people in the city is that Vancouver was becoming a haven for offshore buyers to park money if they were trying to get money out of their country. I don't blame any of these people. I want to make that very clear. You know, they were being advised that this was a safe place to park their money, right? And our provincial government was allowing this to happen. And so what was happening is that people who used to rent the basements of those older homes that stood in the property, or the whole home, or a floor of those homes, were being pushed out, and the rental market was getting squeezed and squeezed. And so suddenly all of these people who normally would not find themselves without a house were finding themselves houseless. And I started to notice a lot more vans, RVs, cars parked down around our beautiful beaches. And it was very clear that people were living in these vehicles. And I'm not a particularly political person, but it was, it was very upsetting, and it was upsetting for a lot of people. And it took a long time for our then government, I don't think, did anything about it. It became a big hot button issue in the election. Some things have changed. There's now an empty homes tax, but it still hasn't changed anything as much as it should, that's for sure. It's still a huge problem in the city. I don't know if you have a similar problem in Portland, but that was the impetus for me to start writing this book. And I started with, I knew that what I needed was a very sympathetic, lovable protagonist who you fall in love with from the get-go. Because the last thing that I will say, and then I want to open it up to your questions, is that I often also write about things that make me uncomfortable, because I try to examine why am I uncomfortable about this? And homelessness, seeing homeless people, and we have many people without a house, living on the streets. When I pass by some of these people on the streets, I feel uncomfortable. And sometimes I feel like, oh God, there's another one. Are they going to ask me for money? And I wanted to examine that. And so I wanted us, because of course, people without a house are just like you and I, right? And that's what I wanted to do with Felix. I wanted to make him somebody who is just like you and I, and that we obviously care for him and fall in love with him and go on this journey with him, so that we can, walk in his shoes and hopefully look at things perhaps from a slightly different perspective. So I kind of do it for my sake too, so that I can look at things from a more humane perspective as well. I'm going to stop there because I'm very aware. It's kind of funny when you're speaking into a vacuum, but I want to make sure that I have time to answer any and all questions that you may have for me. And I think Katie is going to come on and be my guide with the questions.
Hello, Susan. Thank you for that tremendous talk. I know there were times where my heart caught in my throat, and at the other times there were tears of laughter, actually, from this that you've shared. So, thank you very much. I would like to ask any of our attendees in the webinar, if you have questions for Susan, feel free to put them in the Q&A at this time. That icon is down at the bottom of your screen. Just type those questions in and we'll see them come through. While you do that, I'd like to get us started off, Susan, with a question related to Hillsboro Reads and the idea that houselessness, housing insecurity can affect anyone. When you were inspired to write No Fixed Address, you met people who were going through something, and you were able to think about that 8-year-old girl and what she may have thought about what was going on. With Felix, you wrote a great protagonist that, yes, we do fall in love with him, and we fall in love with him as he goes on his journey and experiences so many hardships. As a children's book writer, how did you decide what hardships to include, what to leave out? What guided your writing and your choices?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Truly for me, I just tried to put myself in Felix's shoes and imagine day-to-day life in a VW van. A friend had a friend who owns a VW van, so she toured me through the van so that I knew exactly the space that we would be, dealing with, that Felix would be living in with his mom. What was remarkable in some ways, none of my books are easy to write, but in some ways, placing Felix in this particular situation, it wasn't hard to find the drama, the stakes, the suspense, because every day was going to be challenging in some way, right? Whether it's that somebody's asking you why you're parked there. You've been parked there for too long. I'm going to call the city on you. Finding the bathrooms are closed down at the beach, which is happened to any of us just when you're out for a walk. But if that's where you've been living and sleeping, what does that mean to you? His mom, of course, I loved writing Astrid, and because it plays so fast and loose with the rules and with the law. What do you do when you're also living with a mom who will, in order to protect you, break into one of these empty homes and park your van in the garage, or break into her friend's house, Solveig, so that they can live comfortably for a few days when they know they're away. The ideas came pretty fast and furious with this one, because the moment I started to just imagine that day-to-day existence, there was a lot of fodder to put in the book. I would never go terribly dark in my books. I pull back before anything gets too dark. So, the incident that finally brings them to the police station, when those two men surround the van, that is a terrifying event. But I'm not going to take it any further than where it goes. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much. We do have a question in the chat. Where did you get the inspiration for the character Astrid? You mentioned that they weren't really based on your own mother.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a great question. Yeah, I always have to be very careful that people know. And really, if you read any of my other books, I don't think my mom is much like any of most of my moms, but maybe Ashley's mom in We Are All Made of Molecules a little bit. But for me, Astrid, it'll perhaps sound funny, but she was such a pleasure to write. I loved writing her. I have wanted to write a female adult character who is exceptionally complex and complicated, and somebody who I think makes some readers very frustrated. But the inspiration for her, and I think we probably all have, I have met people with some of her qualities over my lifetime, people who are very charismatic, who you're drawn into their orbit immediately. You think this person is fabulous. I want to know this person. And then that person starts to perhaps take advantage of your friendship, borrow money and not pay it back. You realize that perhaps there are other issues afoot, mental health issues, which, and that's not obviously not a reason to abandon a friendship. I certainly don't mean that. But, I think Astrid is somebody who's very good at pulling people in, and then she's very good at pushing them away. And I loved to explore her and to hopefully allow people to understand why she is the way she is. She had her own painful upbringing, painful events in her life. So I know it sounds odd given some of the content of the book, but I loved writing her. But I honestly wouldn't want her as my friend. And I wouldn't want her as my mother. One of my, I have, when my book is close to the finished product, I always get beta readers, young readers, readers, for example, like I'm not Chinese Canadian, so I get a couple of Chinese Canadian readers to read it for authenticity, for example, with Winnie, things like that. And one of my readers called Astrid a letdown mom. And I thought that was a beautiful way of putting it. She's not a bad person, but, and I mean, a lot of us make that journey of discovery that our parents are, maybe great people, but not necessarily great parents, right? Which is one of the things that Felix learns.
Thank you for sharing that insight. As a adult or as a parent or as a teacher reading these books, it's very clear that you treat your characters as people. They aren't perfect, mm-hmm. but they're not completely terrible. Everybody has both sides of the coin, and you've really shown that throughout the book.
Well, thank you.
Oh, sure thing. Thank you again for your time this evening. I do have another question that's come through. I know that your book has been translated into any number of languages, including Spanish. It's Sin Dirección Ya, which has also been shared with our Spanish-speaking community, Hillsboro. But because of that, you've really tapped into a global issue at this point in time. The question that's come through is, have other communities like Hillsboro contacted you about the impact your book has had or asked you to come talk?
Oh, that's a great question. And sorry, I just grabbed this one. And, I realize I've gotten up twice now during this. So like you've actually seen that I'm wearing sweatpants, which is really embarrassing. So anyway. This is the Spanish version. I was super excited that this one got translated into Spanish. Have I been contacted by other schools? Interestingly, pre-pandemic, I was doing a lot of in-person school visits, and in a number of schools, at the end of my presentation, a teacher would come up to me and say, "I'd like to introduce you to one of our students." And I heard from students who had been in this situation or were in this situation, or had come this close to being in that situation. And that was, obviously always very moving for me. I would have to say, though, and so this is truly kudos to Hillsboro and your organization and your people on the ground. I have not been asked to give a talk to a program like this, where you have gotten my book into the hands of 600 or 700 people, and that you have been doing so much community work around the issues of houselessness. No, this is a first. So yeah, kudos to you.
Thank you for saying that. And I'd like to make it clear that that kudos actually goes to our Hillsboro community. Hillsboro Reads is a program that we collect titles for nominations and we put it to a community vote. So Nomadland and No Fixed Address were selected as the community's picks for this year's Hillsboro Reads program. So that kudos is for all of the students out there, all of the teachers out there, the parents, the educators, the librarians, the library staff, the library visitors and patrons. They have made this happen. So, all right. I do have another question. When you think about writing your next book, and this is actually more about your experience as a writer, where do you look for your inspiration? You showed us your diary. Anything in the works?
Well, okay, so I'll answer the second part first. Sadly, I don't have anything in the works right now. Tremendous Things came out in May. May of 2021. I am back in the land of television doing this show that I created. This was a great surprise to me that it was an old idea that resurrected. It's called Family Law. It has just been sold in the States. So it should actually air in the States, hopefully this summer. So that has taken up all of my kind of creative bandwidth. But I will absolutely write more novels. I know that. I just, I don't know when. And I seem to be I'm like a serial monogamist when it comes to ideas. I seem to only be able to do one thing at a time. As for where my inspiration comes from, it comes from so many different places. Like I would say with my books, Word Nerd, for sure, Dear George Clooney, Please Marry My Mom. That's a kid whose mom has gotten divorced. It's messy. Dad's left for another woman, started another family. That's what happened in my world. We Are All Made of Molecules is the story of a blended family. My mother eventually remarried when I was 18 years old to a man who had 4 kids. So suddenly I had like a stepdad and 4 step siblings. So those ideas, I can see, I know exactly where the beginnings of the idea came from, because I can tap into a lot of those emotions, et cetera. And then other books, The Reluctant Journal of Henry K. Larson, that's the most tragic story I've ever written. It's still got humor. All my books have humor, but this is the aftermath of a school shooting. Henry's older brother goes to high school one day, shoots this boy who has relentlessly tormented him, and then turns the weapon on himself. And the book is the aftermath of this. And that idea came from reading a book by Wally Lamb, The Hour I First Believed. And he placed a character into the very real life tragedy of Columbine High School. And there was a line in the book that mentioned that one of the shooters had a brother. And it just stopped me in my tracks. I remember I was it was like suddenly I couldn't breathe. And I thought, every time I read one of these stories, I think, well, that kid was a monster raised by monsters. And again, I talk about the judgmental side of my brain, right? The judgmental side of me. And it just struck me, what would it be like to be the surviving sibling of a boy who has committed this irreversible act of violence? And he's not even there to question, right? And of course, these people aren't monsters, right? And of course, it's more complex. And so that's where I started to explore that idea in that particular novel. So I never know where my ideas are going to come from. And I can tell you, I really hope another one pops into my brain soon. I'd like to be noodling another novel idea. So
noodle away, but
if you've got
stay
any ideas,
focused on
send
the
them my
one.
way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Work on the one first.
Yeah.
I do have one more question for you before we wrap up.
Sure.
And it's something that I think has put us really into that frame of mind about how we understand the people around us, the students around us. This person said they loved the relationship of Felix and his friends. Did you have a hard time trying to write about how Felix fears of them finding out he lived in a van, how much that bothered him, and how his friends finally figured out? Was that hard to write?
Oh, that's interesting. It's funny, the things that hard to write. Sometimes I know that I have to write a scene that is like writing what happens near the end of the book when those guys surround the van. That I find I have to steel myself when I sit down, because I know that it's a scary, frightening moment. But it's also very clear in my head. It's a very active scene. I know what's going to happen. So in terms of his friends finding out, is it hard to write that stuff? I would say, I'd love to ask the person who's asking the question, but I know I can't do that. If you mean if it's emotionally hard, I don't find it emotionally hard. In some ways, having that element of his friends not being able to find out is, quite frankly, a gift for me as a writer, because that adds a layer of suspense, right? So, and then when, at the end of the dance, when Dylan's dad says, "No, of course I'm going to drive you home." Well, suddenly you've got this scene that could be really boring, like he's just driving a kid home. But now it's a scene full of suspense and agony for Felix, because he doesn't live there. And they're actually taking him across town from where he actually lives. And he's going to have to go down this alley, and they've got a dog now, and the lights come on. So I suppose, if I'm completely honest, that stuff is actually a gift to the writer. Like, the mercenary part of me loves that stuff, because I know that's adding tension and stress to Felix's story, and that it is, again, hopefully causing you, the reader, some stress and tension on Felix's behalf. And I want that, because I want you to be on his journey with him. I hope that answered your question. It was a good question.
I can tell you, if as much as it made it easier to write because it was adding that tension and that stress, as a reader, there was tension, there was stress, and we were on that emotional journey with Felix. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna try not to.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and yeah, I know. Like and I do find when he actually does show them the van, and he's trying to be really optimistic about it, and then he's seeing their expressions, even Dylan, and that they're telling him this isn't okay. And that was hard to write. Yeah.
And that's really a message, I think, for all of our students living in Hillsboro who are struggling with housing insecurity, that there are people who care about you. There are people who want to help, but by keeping it a secret, by hiding it, we can't do that. We can't reach out that hand. We can't help. And so,
Yes.
watching who may or may not be experiencing housing security, who may have a friend experiencing housing security or houselessness, there are people to help you. There are people who care about you and want you to be okay.
Yeah.
On that note, Susan, looks like we're just about to wrap up. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Oh gosh. I don't think anything, beyond just my own gratitude for this opportunity, really. And yeah, really, that's all that I can think of. Yeah, but I really thank you for being here. It's been really lovely.
Thank you. And now we'll have Hillary, our library director, come back on for a few closing remarks. Thank you, Susan.
I wish, Susan, that you could have heard the laughter in my household during your very real sharing, your journals, your Billy Idol hair. Thank you for just sharing your honest story with us. I hope that students will be inspired by your just realness, even the sweatpants. We appreciate that. We appreciate it. I sure hope to meet you in person one day. We would love to have you come for real to the Hillsboro Public Library.
I would love that so much. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to make it happen. Darn COVID and pandemic, but thank you, Zoom, for making it possible to still host this type of engaging discussion. Thank you to the audience for the questions. Thank you, Jonathan and Sarika, for your interpreting tonight. It was wonderful to make ASL available to our audience. I do just want to share a couple closing remarks, and then we'll kind of wrap it up for tonight. So a reminder that PALS is offering that 20% discount. I want the audience to remember that. It's great to support the local bookstore. So Hillsboro Reads is your code, one word, all caps. We do have more events planned. So Hillsboro Reads has been the whole month of March. You can go onto our YouTube channel to see the previously recorded events, I think including a panel we did on houselessness and a trivia night. So please check out our YouTube channel. And on Saturday, we will host our keynote speaker, Jessica Bruder, for Nomadland. So that can be something you can watch online, even in Canada, Susan, if you'd like.
Yeah, that's. I feel like I'm in very. I don't know. I was amazed that my book got to sit along Nomadland. That's pretty cool. So
a very cool pairing. Yes. So as soon as we end this webinar tonight, I mentioned that we do really want your feedback. And so a survey will pop up, is my understanding. If that doesn't work for any reason, you can find it on our website or contact the library. We'd really love to hear from people about this program and how the program's been going for you as we plan our 2023 program. I think it's short. It'll only take a couple minutes. So thank you for doing that. For now, though, I will sign off for the library with gratitude and just thanking Susan for your time and your compassion and your writing and everything you do to inspire. I especially hope young readers to keep writing, even the garbage. Keep the garbage because they'll want to look at it later.
They will. They will.
It's important. I have that same garbage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And so thank you everybody for attending, and we'll share the link out so more people can attend. Thank you, Katie, for your emceeing the questions, and to the committee who's here tonight. Appreciate it, everybody. And the books are available. Hillsboro Reads 2022 continues throughout the month of March. Good night and take care.
Thank you so much.
Great to meet you.
Yeah, you too. It was really fun. And thanks to Jonathan and Sarika as well. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Bye.